us now fix the last step in our range slider integer component. So we don't need this output anymore. This was just used for playing around and debugging, so we can remove the whole output thing, and we were using it here. And we also have a class styling. So if we remove it, we're left with the slider and with the input. They are each independent components, so we now need to wrap them into some sort of container. So let's create a new element and call it RSE, for example, RSI. And then we can say RSI class list, and we say add, and we just also call it RSI just for simplicity. And then we will append these two components to the RSI instead of to the shadow directly. So this goes here, and then to the shadow we append RSI. Nothing should change, but we now have a RSI container with the class RSI, which we can now style and say, for example, background color red, just that we see. Okay, so it's a container RSI that is including a slider and an input. And now we can start positioning them. So we don't need this background color, but we can just say display grid. So let's make this into a grid. And then let's say grid template columns. And we say, I don't know, 8 fractions and 1 fraction. So what we did, if we go here and click on the grid, we basically created a grid for this container, for RSI container, this element. And then we said everything inside should be arranged into the columns. And the first element in this grid should take 8 fractions of the whole space, and the second one should take 1 fraction. So our first element is range slider, and the second one is input integer. So if we now change these to 1, 1, they would be basically positioned 50-50. And each one is starting in their section at the beginning. So this one is taking half of the space, and it takes the whole width of the space. And this one is taking the second part of the space, and it starts at the beginning, but it doesn't take the whole width. So this is not how we want it. So we want to make it something like this. And then we want to also align it. So now we can go and play here to see what would be the best option. So let's say align content. No. Align items. Yes. So we want to align them in the center. So now we can copy this over. And then we want to make some kind of space here. So we don't want this second element to start at the beginning of its field, of its fraction, but a bit later. So we can just say justify content. No, it's also justify items. Yes, and we say center. So it will center both of them, but this one is taking anyway the whole space, so it doesn't change anything. But for this element that is a bit smaller than the fraction, it will center it in the middle of that fraction. So justify items center. Okay, and now we can copy this part over too. So let's see. And yes, here we can check what the grid looks like, and if you remove it, if we're satisfied with this, for example, we can also say that the whole RSI container should have a little bit of padding around. So let's say padding 5%, for example. Oops, 5%. So if we check, it has like a padding around the element, so that from above, from the sides, and from bottom, it has some space. Of course, this is totally random. I mean, you can decide the way you want, and maybe it's not even so good to add so much padding, because this is a component that we might use in other components. It will be a subcomponent for our web page or whatever, and then we want to define the padding where we use it, and not to have this default already set. But for now, we can just do it like this. So we have our integer slider working. It looks somehow pretty. So I think we're ready to publish it. So first of all, let's check our package.json. We have everything here. The version is 1. We didn't publish it to npm yet. And we don't have any README yet. So we could add this. Usage. We copy from demo. So we can say require, mine will be called range slider integer. And then this is how we can use it. And these are the options that we pass, and we call it, and then we append that to the page. Okay, so now let's do it. Publish it, npm run build, git add. Let's see what were git log -1 line -5. Let's see if we ever committed anything. We had just the initial commit, so we can now say git commit add communication with subcomponents and basic styling. And now we can git push. And let's do also npm publish. Okay, so our range slider integer component is finished. If we run it again, it has all the properties that we wanted. It includes 2 submodules. It communicates with them, and we can use each of these modules independently. So only the input integer, only the slider, or if we want an input integer slider, then we can just require newly published component range slider integer, or whatever you will call your component.